Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. We all please stand and rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. McCausland, would you call roll, please?
Mrs. Weiss. Mr. Grisbeck.
Here.
Ms. Hopi.
Here.
Ms. Janasek.
Here.
Mr. McGregor. Mr. Modrak.
Here.
Mr. Scalzo.
Here.
Ms. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you, sir. Tonight's meeting is part of the Facilities and Service Committee, and we're here to review some of the projects we have upcoming. There are time for public comments, and as in the past, the public comments are available if you call in at 412-851-6911. Also at this time at the meeting, also we have representatives from municipality, including Councilman Mowry and Borough Manager Mr. Christian, and some of the engineering department. We also have representatives here from the Hayes Design Group, and we also have representatives here from Sitelogic that are in attendance. At this time, Dr. Welsh, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I apologize for my inability to join you in person tonight, but I'm glad we have this time to be together to get all things related to Bethel Park facilities straightened out and planned to move forward. At the last time we were together, we talked about a facilities master plan, and there's still some items, we'll call them variables, that need to be cleared up. Tonight's discussion should include conversation about the opportunity to make the IMS renovation a GISA project, to talk about the second phase of IMS and when that timing would work for the district, and then jump in also to a conversation about the last of the feasibility study options, 8, 9, and 10, or 8, 9, and 12, excuse me, and where the board wants to see our focus on those remaining options. I believe the place to start tonight might be with the IMS and GISA project, so the folks from Sitelogic can give a brief education to the board about this, and then we'll see what you think.
Thank you.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think you're muted, Garrett.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
And now.
And also, I'll just confirm, because I can't see it on my screen, but can you see the screen that I have up, a PowerPoint screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. I'll start where Dr. Walsh started tonight as well. Garrett Lewis, Executive Vice President of Sitelogic. I also am unable to be in attendance tonight, due to an exposure as well, and a quarantine that I'm observing, as well as our president of our division, Rick Evans. So we're both going to be joining via the WebEx and the live stream tonight. So we do appreciate you guys allowing us to present virtually so that we can accommodate the health and safety policy that we have here. In addition to that, Scott Palmquist from our team is in the room tonight. So Scott will be available to answer questions, before and after the presentation, if there's anything that anybody doesn't feel like they've gotten an opportunity to ask of myself or of our president, Rick Evans. But where we're going to start is talk a little bit about Sitelogic and how we approach Bethel Park. We do present ourselves typically to school districts who work a lot in the South Hills, in particular outside of Pittsburgh, but as a new approach to Pennsylvania public school construction and planning. And we'll jump into what that means. We'll elaborate on what we mean by that here going forward, if I can advance the slide. Who we are as Sitelogic, just a little bit of an introduction and a background of who we are. Our tagline is planning for tomorrow, building for today. It's never been a more appropriate tagline than I think the post-COVID environment, post-COVID world that we're living in right now, especially as it relates to planning and construction for public schools. We do have, if you see the map there, we do cover the Mid-Atlantic region. Most of our work is Pennsylvania school construction. We do school design and commissioning in the states of Maryland and Virginia as well. We have 3 offices across the state. We're headquartered in Harrisburg, but we maintain our second largest office in Oakmont, Pennsylvania. Out of the Oakmont office, currently we've done about $1 billion of public school, either managed or at risk, public school construction, I should add. About 27 years working across the state with public schools in Pennsylvania. 300 plus projects, about 100 different school districts at this point. I think about 1/5 of the school districts in the state of Pennsylvania we've worked with in some form or fashion as a professional services agency. We have about $650 million of Pennsylvania school construction currently under management statewide today as we speak. So a big space in the Pennsylvania school market, but we stick to what we do and we do it well, and that's Pennsylvania public schools. Some of our local experience, most recently completing the Peters Township School District, both the new high school in conjunction with the architect Hayes, but also their existing high school and the conversion to the middle school that we performed as a GISA project, similar to what we're going to talk to you all about tonight with the Independence Middle School. Woodland Hills School District, we've done about $90 million of work with Woodland Hills over the last 5 years. We're in the design and bidding phase at North Hills, the Westview Elementary School. Work at Hempfield School District right now, potentially a new high school. In the planning process phases of that, we've worked at Armstrong Area School District. We're a repeat offender with the Mount Pleasant School District as far as construction. It's pretty much every summer at this point, as well as Ken McMillan. We provided construction management services on multiple projects there. Coming off a job right now to start a new elementary school in September. So a lot of work in the local area. We're doing My Site IQ and some of our long-term facility maintenance planning now with Upper St. Clair as well. So some of the regional districts in the South Hills, a lot of familiarity with them. Who we are as Sitelogic, we are internally, professionally, at a high level, 30,000 feet, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and design engineers, construction management. We do have traditional construction management services that we offer, so that's all new construction, blacktop to rooftop. Within our construction management organization, we have traditional project managers, site superintendents, professional estimators, professional schedulers, a whole bevy of professional construction professionals. And then we also have our construction at risk and our GISA procurement division. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. That is the work that we perform at risk as a general contractor. We work as a general contractor in the private sector as well as the public sector. We're going to teach you about how we bring our at-risk construction methodology to the public sector. We also do provide building commissioning and performance assurance services as a standalone agency. So both certified commissioning techs and performance assurance specialists, which is really training and operations maintenance management. Our team at Bethel Park and the team that's been meeting with the administration to date, as well as the other professional service firms at Bethel Park, is Rick Evans, who's on the call tonight, again, our president, myself, vice president, Mike Arnold, our program executive, who's actually out sick tonight, so he was unable to attend as well. He leads our Oakmont office and is currently the program executive most heavily involved with Bethel Park. And then in the room with you all is Scott Palmquist, our senior account executive. One further on the right-hand side, I'll just point out 4 of them. Tim Warner, our director of pre-construction, has been working on deliverables, an estimate revision, as well as a constructability review. And then John Dudash, our chief superintendent, has been working with our team to provide a phasing plan that we'll review tonight. At the bottom, Rochelle Fennell is who we're proposing if we ultimately go to construction as a partner of Bethel Park as the senior project manager, and Steve Reckard as an on-site construction manager. Both Rochelle and Steve most recently completed the Peters Township high school to middle school conversion project at risk, as well as the new construction of the Peters Township High School. So we will be transitioning the 2 of them who work well together from Peters Township to Bethel Park for your project. Just as far as the Bethel Park construction leaders, for those individuals that you'll see the faces that you would familiarize yourself during construction, I know Zeb, you asked this question. Mike Arnold is the project executive, Rochelle and Steve, as I mentioned, and then Ellen Jarina joining them as the project coordinator and administrative support specialist. These are our construction leaders. All 4 of them are based out of our Oakmont office in Pennsylvania. And those are the 4 faces, like I said, during construction that you would be most familiar with. Pre-construction, it's typically myself, it's Rick, it's Scott, or it's Tim Warner or Mike, one of the other names that I mentioned in the organizational chart. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick to talk about what a partnership with Sitelogic would look like on your project at the Independence Middle School.
Thank you, Garrett. I'm going to start this part of the presentation by talking about why Sitelogic is unique to the PA school construction market. And then we're going to finish up about talking very specifically about the IMS project and Bethel Parks project. Well, Garrett outlined the many facets of our company. First and foremost, we are builders. We understand construction procurement at its deepest levels. With that said, Sitelogic has brought a new option for construction delivery to Pennsylvania public schools. We're using the GISA, you're going to hear that term a lot, Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, procurement statutes to bring single prime design build construction to public projects. In my early years, I spent a lot of my early years doing private sector construction in the Washington, D.C. market. And what I found in that market was by far, the preferred method was single prime design build. And the reasons for that are many. They start with lower cost, higher quality projects, ability to utilize preferred subcontractors, not low bidders. We can weed out the low bidders. And schedule compression. And construction, time is money. So schedule compression means you get in your facility sooner and you save money doing so. Public procurement law in PA requires school districts to take on significant risk in construction. They require a minimum of 4 prime contractors, therefore making the district essentially the general contractor and holding them responsible for a lot of the risk that's associated with general construction, including risk for change orders, schedule delays, things like that. Low bid contractors that you cannot legally weed out of the process. So there's a lot of risk put in to these projects by the outdated, what I would call outdated procurement laws in Pennsylvania. So the benefits of this delivery method that we're talking about tonight are no change orders. By law, we cannot charge a change order. So the price we give you on day one is the price at the end of the project. We also can qualify subcontractors so that we only have high quality subcontractors. We do want to bid to work. We believe in bidding work. We believe in the competitive process. It does lead to the best price, but we don't want to utilize contractors that are simply in the game to change order you and look for ways to make money that way. We also want to significantly improve on the construction schedule and the quality control, which we can do under this methodology. So next slide. So there are several sections to the acts, starting with Act 57 with GISA law, but I'm going to draw your attention in the lower left hand to the Act 163 of 2016. I started this company with the idea of bringing the private sector experience to public schools. And this is the act that really came to my attention as the best means to bring all the desired attributes to it. And in 2016, we amended it to actually include some additional savings categories. I actually wrote that act, and Sitelogic pushed that through, and we actually got procurement law changed in 2016. It really opened the doors to what we were already doing, but allowed us to do it in a larger scale and a more effective scale. So that was really a game changer back then. And as we look through the statutes, there's really two categories I want to look at right now. That's energy savings related. So there are 19 items that are essentially energy savings items, such things like HVAC systems, electrical systems, plumbing systems, building envelope, roof, windows, exterior doors, things that are allowable under the Energy Act as allowable scopes of work. Lighting, building envelope, caulking and sealing, things like that. So there's a lot of the work in a renovation project that is already allowable under GISA procurement laws. In addition to that, there's the statute includes a cost savings other than an energy savings that results from the implementation of an energy project. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Some of the examples of that are schedule compression, savings that results from rapid materials and labor inflation. Right now, we are in an inflationary market in construction. Therefore, getting out to bid and compressing our schedules will save us money. Absolutely. And you'll see when we get into our construction phasing and our proposed schedule for this job, how we plan to do that. Additionally, the elimination of change orders on supply chain related materials and or delays. Because in today's market, even after the bids, manufacturers are coming back and asking for additional monies based on supply chain, and they end up being change orders. So since we cannot change order you, you will not be subject to those change orders. And lastly, there's significant reduction in general conditions associated costs. You'll see when we talk about the project schedule. So it's things like mobilization and the elimination of temporary classrooms have significant savings. So all these things are savings that are related to the performance of that construction project, and it allows us significantly more work to fall into the project. Next slide. So as we do our evaluation of this particular project, the chart you're looking at is, if we go to the far left of that, those would be smaller projects, maintenance type projects that typically are performed by the school district. And that's the best means and methods for that. If we go to the far right, we would have new construction. So new construction is not allowed under GISA procurement. So that would be, if it's a renovations and additions, we can use a methodology we call hybrid, where we combine GISA and public procurement into a single procurement methodology, and we manage the whole thing. But your project really falls in this middle ground where we believe it is 100% GISA eligible. And that is because, one, a lot of the items such as the HVAC, the electrical, mechanical, plumbing, there's a lot of infrastructure to this project. It's heavily weighted that way. So, in addition to that, the incidental work, like the ceilings, we have to remove the ceilings to put HVAC in. We can claim the ceilings as part of the projects. So we feel very, very confident that this project can fall into that category. And then a third area we can also utilize is what's known as the 15% rule. And that means 15% of this contract can be anything the district deems it wants to be. So even if it doesn't fall into the other two savings categories, it can be done under the 15%. So roughly on a $10 million job, that's $1.5 million that can be done of incidental work, carpet, flooring, paint, things like that can be done under this project. So with that said, we're quite comfortable saying that this can be a GISA-owned project, which is a good thing, because there's a lot of advantages that, and we'll drop into that. So looking at the advantages of this methodology, why do we want to do this? One, it's a single source construction accountability. So we no longer have 4 primes. We really eliminate all the finger pointing. There's one place to point the finger, and that's at Sitelogic, and we are responsible for all things construction related. It also eliminates change order exposure. As I said before, we cannot legally give you a change order. So the price is fixed, it's a lump sum price and is fixed, it will not change. We have improved quality control because we can limit the bidders to high quality subcontractors that we are familiar with, that like to work with us, we like to work with them, and we actually found that we get better pricing. Because the subcontractors know we're going to be running the job, they know the job's going to be run extremely well by our highly professional field construction staff. That means they can make money, so they're not going to have a general contractor that is delaying the job, missing deadlines, creating problems with change orders and delays related to change orders. They're just going to get in there, they're going to get the job done, and they're going to make money. So we actually had a job at East Pennsboro School District where the district decided to bid the first phase both ways. And what it turned out was, and the district came back to us, how is it possible that we got a bid from this contractor on a public bid and we got the same contractor on a new job for less money? And I explained why. That's because they know this job is going to run very, very well. They're going to perform on the job. We can also use expedited schedules. So at Woodland Hills School District, we performed over $20 million worth of work from April to August in a single year. So that's unheard of in public sector construction, but because we're holding all the contracts, because of our construction expertise, we can put that much work in place in that short of a period of time, and that's a huge advantage to the school district. At their high school job, we eliminated all temporary classrooms. That was a $2 million savings to the school district. And that's $2 million that doesn't go into bricks and mortar. It's temporary, it gets put in, it gets taken away, and the money's gone. So there's a lot less disruption to the students and staff as well, when the majority of the work is done during the summer. We do some work second shift during the school year, very in tune to site safety and cleanup and making sure those spaces are ready to be occupied the next day. So we're very in tune to working second shift when we have to. But by and large, the majority of our work is put in the summer months. So then going beyond construction, we, as a GISA contractor, have to give the school district a guarantee by law. We have to give you guaranteed energy savings. And if I drop to the bottom line here, our 20-year estimated energy savings on this job is somewhere between $1.1 and $1.3 million. That money can be used to pay off debt service. It can be used for other projects or any way the district chooses to use it. But because we have to guarantee that savings, that means we have to ensure that the systems that we install operate properly. So we have an entire department called our Performance Assurance Department. And they spend the entire year post-project, and even beyond that, for a fee. If you like the services, you can keep the services going. Monitoring the systems, managing the warranty work, and watching your energy bills to make sure that everything is working exactly the way it's supposed to work. We can also provide additional training above and beyond the training that was provided with the project itself. So, and they really become part of your staff. Folks will get to know our folks, and if they have an issue, they can call one of our staff members and get support, engineering support, system support. We can remote access your systems and help troubleshoot. So there's a lot of post-project support that does not happen in traditional public procurement. So a lot of benefits to this methodology. I want to make sure that I went over those thoroughly so you really understand, the intent of, why we do construction this way and the benefits to the school district. It really is about creating a better construction experience. And some of your neighboring districts like Peters Township will attest to that. They've done projects with us in both methodologies, and I think it's safe to say that they vastly prefer the GISA methodology.
Does anyone have any questions about GISA that they didn't cover? And how does the board feel about doing this as 100% GISA project?
Hey, Doug, I just had one question, and Rick and Garrett, thank you. There's a really good explanation on your approach and the GISA methodology. I guess, the one question I had in my mind, because I just saw this in the news about a month ago, is that Peters is involved in about a $4 million lawsuit with their subcontractors, from building their high school. Could you just clarify, were you involved in that part of it also? Or, you talked a lot about minimizing risk to the school district, but, a $4 million lawsuit seems like a lot of risk.
Yeah, I'll handle that, Barry. So we talked about how we built, constructed, and procured with Peters Township under two different methodologies. Mm-hmm. The reason that they elected to proceed with the high school to middle school conversion, which was the second project. So the lawsuits are related to the high school project, which was new construction. Okay. Because of the Pennsylvania Procurement Act, we couldn't take that under a GISA. That had to go to the public bid. That general contractor, I think, is involved in litigation at 6 school districts right now. So Peters Township does not stand alone with that low bid GC. So ultimately, why they elected to go to the GISA for the current high school to middle school conversion project was to get away from having to work with a low bid general contractor. And this was the only vehicle for which they could do it. So once that happened, we ultimately took that project, the conversion project, the second of the two, did it under the GISA, and we've actually closed out that job that started, I think 18 months later than the new construction, before they've actually closed out the new construction project. Okay. And so it's just, that is really where we exercise the benefits of the procurement methodology, was at Peters Township because of the failed experience with the low bid GC. Unfortunately, in the Pittsburgh market, there's a lot of bad actors right now. That market, it's a little bit of a game as far as when those general contractors put their number together, they're looking at those documents, they're trying to evaluate them for where is the change order potential. And right now, when you've got lead times, that are 18 weeks on things like red paint, red latex paint, the change order opportunities are a mass and they're large. And significant. So what we're trying to do is help you understand, look, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid the litigation. We want to avoid the multi-prime situation where the school district holds 4 contracts, right? You become the GC legally because you've got 4 prime contractors that are contracted to you, not to your architect, not to your CMA, but to you. Under this methodology, we are the only ones that you hold a contract with during construction. So if something goes wrong on that job, it's Sitelogic and Sitelogic only. I can't point the finger at the architect. I can't point the finger at the electrical contractor. I can't blame schedule. There's one throat to choke for you and your community. And so I think that's also a big benefit for people who want to build in this way. So really what we were trying to do was to bring design build construction to Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states in the United States right now that still requires multiple separate prime construction in the public bid market. So this is a way to do that, but what we're trying to express tonight is we're taking it as far as we can legally on this project. We cannot do it in new construction, but we certainly can in renovation, and we feel strongly that we can here at the Independence Middle School, so that the price at the beginning of the job is going to be the same at the end, and guarantee some of these safeguards that you all will have to bid and procure under the GISA.
Okay, good. One other question, assuming we would go with you, what would that process look like up to the point that we start renovation? Are you the one going out for, okay, there, I guess you got a slide that already addresses that, so you're reading my mind.
And if you want, do you want me to touch on that now, or do you want us to just talk about this slide?
You've got a slide that covers it a little bit later. Let's see if there's any other questions, and we'll address, the timing and the process later in your deck.
Got it.
Yeah, you could drop to the next slide, Garrett. I'm going to touch on this quickly and then get right into your question. So above and beyond the savings we talked about in construction, there's also potential for soft cost savings. We've outlined, what that might look like for Independence Middle School. Again, construction contingency, the architect has put in a 10% contingency, which in this market is very reasonable. Because of the GISA procurement, though, we can significantly reduce that amount, resulting in savings to the district. And also, the construction manager will not be required. We are a GC. You don't need to put a construction manager on top of us. So, right off the bat, we're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $800,000 of soft costs, which again is not money that's going into bricks and mortar or education. It's money that's spent and does not contribute to the project materially. So bump into the next slide. To address your question, this is the phasing plan that we're proposing now. To get from where we are today to construction, all you have to do is vote to award us the GISA, what's called the IGA agreement. Okay, there's no risk and no cost to that. So we will come back to you at bid day with a final number at no risk to the district. So you award us the IGA tonight, we come back, say in March, with a final contract. You're not obligated to pay us a dime until you are satisfied with the scope, the pricing, the contract, and everything. And if you're not, you just walk away from it. So there's no risk between now and getting to that final number. What we're looking at here is our construction phasing plan, our recommended construction phasing plan. And there's a couple of objectives here. One, we want to optimize bid cycles. Bid cycles, they are cyclical throughout the year. In the spring, late winter, early spring, prices go up, the bid market gets flooded. A lot of jobs come out looking to start in the summertime. So we're a little bit ahead of that curve. Our suggestion at this point would be to get out to bid on phase one. Now, phase one is what we're calling phase one is the first floor of the building, the administrative offices, the secure vestibule, and sixth floor fit out. So that portion we would suggest gets out to bid. We're not into the thick of the bidding cycle yet, so we think we can get optimized pricing there. For phase two, we would follow the bid cycle and we would suggest starting design now so that we can get into a very favorable bid cycle, which would be August, September of this year when nothing is out to bid and contractors are starting to look for next year's work and some very favorable pricing there. So from a bidding perspective, we think this is a nice layout of the schedule. The other thing we like about it is you don't have two mobilizations. So if you start a construction project and then you stop it, and then come back, say a year later, you're gonna have to remobilize. And there's a significant cost to contractors for doing that. Once you're mobilized, you just keep on going. So the way we flowed this out between phase one and phase two, we keep the subcontractors engaged, we stay mobilized on the project, and we have minimal cost in terms of, or no cost in terms of remobilizing, and also a lot less disruption. What we are suggesting we do is actually finish the sixth grade classrooms, but not move the sixth grade in. We would use those as swing space. And as we get into phase two, we can take other grades, put them in that wing, and then renovate the wings that they're at. Then move them back and move another group out into that wing, renovate that section. That saves us from putting temporary classrooms in, which are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost. So, and we've also, because we're doing this GISA, we feel this is a compressed schedule that would be very, very challenging under a public bid, or nearly impossible schedule that time we're going to meet. So this puts us at final completion in August of 2023. The building's done, completely occupied, everything's done, ready to go, with the majority of that work, again, happening during those summer months. And some of it second shift, but not disruptive to education for the students. The other thing we can do, because this methodology, is we can look at lead time for supply chain mitigation, particularly on the phase 2 stuff. We may put out even the early bid package, but even at the schedule we have now, we have lots of lead time to get the bulk of the HVAC equipment, which is in phase 2, ordered and delivered, and even potentially in storage if need be. We have a huge warehouse where we can store equipment for situations just like this, for summer construction, where we physically have the equipment sitting there ready to go. And the other thing, and legally we can't give financial advice out, but just today the Feds put out that they're saying there are going to be 3 interest hikes in 2022, and now they've changed it to 4, so it's gone from 3 to 4, so it's actually going up. So if you are intent on doing these projects, obviously it would be beneficial to borrow now as much as you're willing to borrow your interest rates. Essentially when interest rates go up, what happens, your borrowing capacity doesn't go up, so it just means you have less money to spend on your projects. And that's why we put the elementary center at the bottom there. We don't know. We're not into the project enough to know where that's going to lie, but it can certainly run somewhat concurrently, a slight lag time between phase 2 and the start of that, but there doesn't need to be a lot of lag between these 2 projects. They can run concurrently, getting into construction, design and construction. So if that was desirable to the school district, we can certainly manage all of that work.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, as far as where we step in from a bid and construction oversight standpoint, it will free up time from the other professional service partners or your architectural partners to begin the design process of the elementary center, so that they can transition more of their time to the elementary center and focusing on the design completion of that project, while we're focusing on the delivering the renovation project at the Independence Middle School. And I just want to point out, for purposes of everyone on the call, I don't want anyone to think that we're presumptuous about what it is you aren't going to do as a community. But looking at the documents and the information we were given, this is the plan that we would put together, assuming that phase 1 and phase 2 are projects that you would proceed with. If they aren't, certainly those things could change, and then that the elementary center is subsequently a priority. Based off the feasibility study and our conversations with the administration, we put this out for everyone to consider, that these things can be done simultaneously and in conjunction with one another, and that we think that it would be advantageous for you all to consider doing that. If you know that these are projects, or to some level that you are going to pursue projects in the next 1 to 2 to even 3 years, considering where you're at, if there's consensus on borrowing or a specific project, making decisions on borrowing is probably the most significant thing that you can do at this point, as far as identifying cost savings, because delaying that decision just for the sake of delaying a decision to borrow is just going to send more money to the bank and less money to your brick and mortar at this point. So that's all we're trying to say with the interest rates. Not sure where you guys are in the decision-making process, but depending on where you might be, it's something to consider, knowing that that those are pending.
Yeah, well said, Garrett. This, as I said in the beginning, this is our opinion of the best methodology for Bethel Park School District, to get the lowest cost, best project you can out of what we see as your objectives. So, and I'll pause here if there's any questions on the schedule.
or IMS or GISA?
No, that looks good. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense that the rest of the board can speak up. I had just one other question, and this is just, because of some of the things we're dealing with right now. About, 10 years ago, we completed the construction on our high school. Almost everything went great, but there's just a few issues, that with some of the subs that have come up, some problems that we've had to rectify, some, take us to court, I guess. We've had to do all of this stuff individually by ourselves. Can you just talk about how you resolve some of those disputes? And, have you been involved in any, post-construction? And how is it different working with you versus us being effectively the general contractor?
So, Rick, if you want me to, I'll start with the dispute
I'll
resolution.
provide some examples too.
Yeah, so I'll start with this. As far as dispute resolution or disputes with our clients, we've been in the GISA business since 2008. Since 2016, we've been implementing it in the way that we presented tonight. We've never been involved in dispute resolution, litigation, or any such challenge with an owner, between us and an owner on a GISA project. We certainly have been on public bid projects as a construction manager, because we're dealing with the same challenges that you guys might have had then at that point. What I can say to you about the benefit of mitigating risk to the school district, what we mean when we say that is exactly what you just identified. You're not going to be pursuing, XYZ subcontractor. I got to go identify this person. Your dispute resolution, your litigation claim rests with me and me only. So I am the sole prime, which means if there's a lawsuit, if there's an issue on the job 10 years from now, there's something that comes up, there's defective work, we own all of that risk. So that comes to Sitelogic and no one else. And if we have to go, counter sue a subcontractor, that's on us, not the school district, to go identify that sub. He may be out of business, you can't find him, whatever that might be. So legally, if there is litigation, or litigation would become part of your construction experience, let's pray that it wouldn't, it's a much simpler process because it's us. We are the sole source contractor on the job as far as risk. So we own all of that risk that you're talking about, that would linger in 1, 5, 10 years.
Right. Okay. Good. Yeah, that's a good explanation. Good example.
I'll give you another example too on the softer side of that. Northern Bedford School District, we did a GISA project at their high school. And they did use a third-party engineer. It wasn't our engineer, I'm qualifying that. However, a piece of equipment was specified for one section of the building, and the equipment, quite frankly, just never worked properly. So we got it through the warranty period, and eventually the manufacturer walked away from the warranty, and the subcontractor was great, but eventually they said, I can't just keep fixing this stuff for free. And so after 3 years of paying from the school district, I made the decision to go in and replace every piece of that equipment at our cost, no cost to the district. Because, we're not low bid contractors. We can't just come in and bid the next job because we're a low bid contractor. Our reputation is everything. And we can't have a dissatisfied customer, even if it's 2 years out of the warranty period or whatever it is. We're going to stand behind our work.
And it's really as simple as customer service. To simplify this further for the school board, in the public low bid environment, the one bad thing, so competitive bidding, a project or a scope of work is great, right? That's always going to produce competition. It's going to push, price competition. It's a wonderful exercise. The problem is the guaranteed low bid award that is required in this state. Because all I have to do to win the next project is be the low bidder. I don't have to provide customer service. Bethel Park doesn't have to have a good experience with me. I can sue Peters Township, and guess what? I'm still going to go bid North Hills, and I'm getting that work as long as I'm the lowest general construction bid. With Sitelogic, we're coming to you tonight saying, hey, we want to be your design build partner. This is negotiated work with a public agency, just like we'd work with the Hershey Foods, just like we'd work with UPMC. And what we're saying is, hey, if you have a bad experience with us, you're going to go tell Peters Township that. And guess what? I can't just throw a number at you, be the low bid, and get the next job. Customer service and our reputation is all we have. especially in the school market. So that's where we say, Rick and I can tell you all we want about examples, but go talk to our clients, go talk to North Hills, talk to Peters Township, talk to Woodland Hills. We have to stand by our work, because if we don't, we won't get the next job. We can't just throw a number at you and win the award.
Now, Garrett, this is Darren McGregor. I do have a question about that. I know you've mentioned it a couple times. I just want to kind of really drive home the thought that, so let's say the project gets completed and we go with you guys, and then very next week, every one of those subcontractors that you hired are out of business now. So in 4 years, we figured out something that's wrong with whatever happened. Who takes care of that? You guys, or?
That's us.
Absolutely. Subcontractors work for us. Even if a subcontractor went out of business mid-project, if you're in a public bid for prime, you would be responsible for all the losses due to that subcontractor going bankrupt. With us, we are responsible for that. So it's another level of risk elimination. We're getting into the depths of risk mitigation here in construction, but it's a very valid point that, if a subcontractor goes out of business at any point, we are responsible still for the work.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
I do have just point of clarification. So when you talked about the construction leaders at the beginning, we would have somebody on site every day doing the on-site reporting. If we have a question, if somebody has a question, that person is available to the superintendent, assistant superintendent, to give monthly updates to the board, all of those kinds of things. That is something that is done so that we're all well aware that if something slips, what's going on.
Correct. So I went back to the slide deck to show the construction leadership team. As far as anything that happens pre-construction, design, or bid phase, it'll be me and Rick that are talking to the board that will answer to you all for any issues related to that side of the project. Once it goes into construction, as far as board presentations, it's typically going to be Mike Arnold. He's going to be the one that's there every month giving a project update. If there's certain problems or challenges, it would be Mike Arnold that would present those that the superintendent could go to at a high level. On a day-to-day basis, Steve Reckhart will be on site every single day. He'll have a job trailer on site at Bethel Park. He'll live there. He will be basically an extension of Bethel Park staff. I mean, we've had school districts that essentially dress as some of our guys for Halloween some years. So, yeah, Steve will be there every day. So will Rochelle. Rochelle is the senior PM. She will probably be the project manager on 2 jobs during the construction of Bethel Park. But she is pretty hands-on as far as her involvement on site. I know Hayes has worked with her at Peters Township, and anybody who's worked with Rochelle knows how diligent she is. And that the low bed GC is figuring that out at Peters Township too. But that's the team, and so all 3 of them will be available to various levels of your staff every day. Steve on site, Rochelle certainly more is a coordination as far as schedule. And scopes of work and things like that. Mike Arnold is going to be more the contact for the school board, for the superintendent, because there's a lot of strings that he can pull, a lot of levers he can pull at his level. And then Ellen also will spend time on site in the job trailer with Steve.
Okay. My next question is, all your subcontractors will meet all the background qualifications to be in a school on a daily basis, no matter if it's Bethel Park's volunteer and or background checks and all of that. I just know from another experience in another state that it was not done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a lot of the school districts in the state, as you guys know, one, we're required to have, the FBI background check as well as the state required clearances. All of our contractors, all of our subcontractors, and anybody who steps on site will have the required clearances before they come onto the site. It is also our responsibility to make sure that they have those clearances, and we do sticker their helmets so that you can identify those individuals when they're on site, even school administrators, that if they don't have the appropriate signage on their helmet or they're not advertising their background check, that can be questioned directly to Steve as you see that individual, or as you would identify somebody that's not carrying the appropriate badge. So we have multiple ways that we control that, but yeah, absolutely.
This clearance is all kept on file in our office as well.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
because we would have the Bethel Park, would they get a Bethel Park ID also?
We
for
haven't
that?
discussed that, but we could certainly issue Bethel Park IDs as a contractor, yeah.
It's
That's a
just easier
possibility.
for the gentleman and lady in the back to identify them if they're on and around.
Absolutely.
I personally reached out to the Peters Township School Board, in particular, a few school board members, and they gave you high reviews, excellent reviews. They were highlighting the low risk and protections for the district. They were also highlighting the not getting beat up on change orders, and that you are on site, detailed report, and on point with detail. So that was a pretty good, thorough report, had a long discussion, and I think this process is very clear. I like the presentation. I felt it was very professional. I think you gave excellent examples, so I think this is something that we should consider.
I will just, again, point out that Mike, Rochelle, and Steve, they will actually be coming off of the Peters jobs to come to Bethel Park. So as far as the staff and the experience of Peters Township, we do certainly hope to recreate the same experience that they had with you all.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? No?
There is additional services. We're going to present, you don't necessarily have to do that. It's part of our package. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Doug, how far do you want me to introduce the MySiteIQ tool tonight, or no?
No, I don't think you need to do
Just
that.
a time.
That's more, I think, for me administratively.
Got it.
Good.
Doug Disbury, what do you need from the board to move forward? Do we need to vote on Sitelogic? Do we need to approve you going out and developing a contract proposal for them? What's the next step in our internal process?
You'll actually have an agreement on this month's agenda to
Okay.
appoint Sitelogic. You won't have a formal contract until this project is actually defined from a cost level. So it'll be kind of like a fill in the blank type thing where we'll have an agreement with them to proceed. And then once we know the contract price, then we'll establish a formal contract with Sitelogic.
Okay. I mean, I support this, similar to what Vince said. I heard some good things also from Peters, so you guys did do a good job there. Anybody else on the board who's, I guess, has an objection to this?
No, I don't. I totally agree. I also have heard from those in Cannon Mac over the last couple of days, and they were very pleased with Mike and Rochelle at their site.
You know, folks, it's real simple. You live and die.
I got a question real quick for Dr. Jansanti. Can you hear me, Zeb?
Yes, go ahead.
Now, you were obviously the principal of the high school that was rebuilt. Now, back then, did we have a Sitelogic type of company working
No.
for us?
No, as you heard, it really didn't evolve until around 2016. So the high school, we were in construction. We opened on January 30th, 2012. So GISA really didn't come into play until after that.
Now, just here in everything that, from presentation tonight, is this something that you feel if you had for yourself back when we were developing the building, high school and building, would that have been really beneficial for you?
Well, I think the difference is that when you're talking about a renovation versus a full brand new build, there's obviously limitations with GISA. Like the best you can do is a hybrid, but a brand new building, you really don't qualify for GISA. But since we're working it through IMS, it might be a nice triage to continue with Sitelogic as we go into the new building construction, whatever the elementary center, what that may be, whatever, the board decides.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Scott? You want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say
Is your
that,
microphone on, Scott?
This will be the first time I've ever been told you can't hear me.
I'm just worried about the people at home.
9 years of coaching football, I was never told that. I was just going to say that it was really nice hearing the great comments that you've heard from our clients. You live and die by your reputation. It's real simple. You do a good job, everybody hears it. You hope they do. You do a bad job, everybody across the state hears it. That's why when Rick mentioned, we stand behind our word, we go in, we step up, and we go beyond even what we are contractually supposed to do. Because when you're doing work in Pennsylvania, and Doug will tell you, going to PASBO, going to PSBA, and these other conferences, if somebody does a bad job, it spreads quickly. You will not grow, you will not be successful.
Thank you. So at this point, obviously, it looks like we're good with this phase with the GISA. There's no questions on that. Then the next thing is, do we go right into phase 2 with the project?
That's correct. They presented a schedule to move right from phase 1 into phase 2, and we just need to know if that's your desire. I will say, I'll add, and it was already alluded to by Rick, but he is correct. Market interest rates are low right now. Every indication is that they will be going up in the next several months. If you plan to do this complete project, then I would highly recommend you think about borrowing that all at one time, now when rates are lower, if you plan to do both phases of this project.
I agree
I
with
would
that.
say that it was, it was educational and very intuitive once you look at it, but just the, keeping people on site and not starting up, shutting down, starting up, shutting down, it's intuitive that you're going to reduce your costs by keeping the construction going throughout. So, I believe that you start phase 1 and we go all the way through phase 2 at IMS rather than the start-stop approach. It is going to cost more money.
It also becomes much easier to work while students are in the building if you don't have it fully populated. If you were to delay and bring
Yeah.
the 6th grade over, then you would find yourself in a situation where you'd have to put trailers up to house students while areas were being renovated, and it would become much more costly.
You want to do that again?
Right, yeah, and I think the first, phase 1 becomes the, academic rooms for, those that will be renovated in phase 2. And, I think that's how we use the building. I think all that makes a lot of sense. That was great, a great suggestion. And we're not even paying you yet.
I agree. I don't think there's any reason to wait. I think we do need to roll into phase 2. And I think somebody said that you have storage facilities. So if there are large items and things, you could store them. If we were going to
Yeah.
use them in phase 2, you can get them and hang on to it at the current
Correct.
price instead of the price a year and a half from now.
Right.
That's a big
Yeah,
advantage.
so we are working with several clients, obviously, to warehouse stock of materials that we know are available today, that we've been running, short on, or that we know have availability and supply issues periodically. So if there is, and we are looking at some of that in conjunction with the rest of the team to determine what those items might be. And if we do need to warehouse that stuff, we will, and we'll do that in our warehouse, at our own risk and cost. And obviously, it's then our risk to maintain the quality of the stock as well once we purchase it. So if it comes in damaged, that's still our risk too. So yeah, we would do that if we thought it was necessary.
And if it is your intent to proceed with both phases and do the borrowing at one time, then definitely in February, I will have PNC Markets here to talk about authorizing, because I will have to start doing the front end for the bond issuance. So I'll need your authorization in February to proceed so that we have enough time to get the money before we can begin the projects.
That would also help, and this is how much we're going to spend because we know the bond limit and this is all it is, and this
Yeah,
is where we're
and
going.
Sitelogic
Very
and
much.
Hayes will be working on a final construction cost estimate in that interim. So we'll have a pretty good handle, since we're going GISA, what this project's going to likely cost. So we'll have a very good number on what we need to borrow.
Yeah, can I just comment on that? If this schedule is something that the district would wish to proceed with, at least for phase one. Our plan would be, in talking with the designers, they plan to be done with their design. They're about 75% CD is what we currently have, a construction document, but they plan to be done with those documents by the end of the month, early February. We'd like to come to the February facilities meeting then with our estimate revision as far as, hey, what does this look like under the GISA from a cost perspective, both for phase one and phase two versus what, and the last numbers that you may have been shown, I'm not sure what they were. I've seen the budgets, but I don't know, where your last estimate was. But we would provide that number to you at the February facilities meeting and ask for bid approval at that point. If you like the number, you like the scope. Obviously, the scope is what's in the design, but if the number seems palatable to you all, at that point, you would give us what's called permission to bid. We don't need a board motion. We just need a head nod and a handshake. But if we could present that at the facilities meeting, then we could go out to bid following that and come back into the March meeting with a contract, like Doug talked about, that says, okay, hey, here was the estimate. You gave us bid approval in February. We come back in March and say, okay, here's our actual cost after the bid. Here's the contract. Can we get a vote for approval? And at that point, we would then be able to begin mobilization, probably April 1.
And along those lines, we won't be authorizing the issuance of bonds in February. It's just the authorization to do the bidding type work as well. We have to put together the front end of that and pre-market those bonds. So that's what your underwriter will be getting authorization to do. And then once we go to market, then we will pull the trigger at that point.
And we can be, flexible as far as when your borrowing occurs, Doug, with how we phase the work and also how we bill, to make sure that the money and the work would kind of align in the sense that those payments could be made if you ultimately elected to proceed with this schedule.
Yeah, and not to get ahead of things, but we'll talk a little bit about, as we get into the elementary project, a lot of how you're going to finance this or structure the financing will have to do with the choices you make. You've already made one choice that you want to proceed with both phases, so we can do that in one borrowing and have one set of issuance costs. Whatever you elect to do from an elementary standpoint is then going to allow us to go back to the underwriter and say, what's the best strategy then for issuing those bonds or, structuring that debt to minimize the impact on the taxpayer. So all that kind of hinges on what we choose to do, and then we'll go back and I'll throw numbers at you tonight, but they're all subject to change based on how you plan to proceed. And then we can come up with a better plan or an exact plan on what's the best strategy to make that work.
Yeah. And the one thing that I'll add with phase one for the scope of work for this summer, it is aggressive in that we do want to have the admin offices, the secure vestibule, and much of that first floor renovated, newly renovated and fit out space complete by the time that they would return to school in 22. The only lingering work that would occur in the school into the school year of the end, the first part of 2022, in September, October, would be any final fit outs of the classroom spaces. But the admin offices, the secure vestibule, they would be fully functional for the start of next school year. So not 2023, but the start of next year, so that you do have at least a secure entrance, access point, and a new home for the expanded administration. So a significant amount of work would be done between, June and August this year. So that's why, the schedule, if it seems aggressive, I apologize, but as far as bidding and mobilization, getting materials, we would have to start making decisions, by March.
Garrett, let me ask you, what phase are you thinking for the elevators as well as the stairwell?
Yeah, so, Rick, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
I'll address that one. What we're thinking is, in order to get the one elevator in, we'd have to demo the ramp, and that's going to be problematic for access. So we're actually thinking of doing the other elevator, not the one near the administrative offices, but the one in the other part of the building.
By the gymnasium.
Yes.
Yeah, near the gymnasium, right, exactly. Building that one out first. Unfortunately, elevators traditionally have very long lead times to begin with. And to get the walls in, get the elevator in, that it's really not feasible for this summer. To get that elevator in, knock the ramp out, and have those stairs in by the administrative offices. So we would go for that other elevator, get that one in place, and then come back in the second summer and do the ramp and the stairwell in the reception.
And that, sorry, that is actually, would actually allow the students to get to the second floor, the first floor, and the gymnasium if you put that elevator in. So access is much,
It's much more desirable, yes.
Correct. And we have to maintain, accessibility to that second floor through as we're doing the renovation. So there's a little bit of a juggle there with timing on the demo of that ramp along with the install of the second elevator. Because, for the second elevator, then in the summer of 23, we'd like to do, the stairs, the demo, the stairs and the shaft install for that elevator. And then we've got the install of the cab alone, which is about 6 weeks. So it's a push to do a full elevator construction in a summer. The only thing that would bleed past August of 23 might be that second elevator by a week or two as our current schedule lines. It's showing like mid-September for completion of the second elevator. But elevators are tough, and we have to maintain accessibility to the second floor through the construction and renovation. And so we can't take anything offline, until we have one on. So we're working with that right now on the schedule, but those elevators are the one hinge point for us right now that we see.
So it seems like everyone's in agreement, we're going phase one and phase two, but I think we still have the one issue of, do we continue with Hayes Group?
That's correct. Your last decision on the IMS project is if phase two is going to continue right after, are you going to continue to use the Hayes Group? I know you haven't asked me, but I'm going to give you my recommendation. I
Please.
think it would be very smart to continue on with the Hayes Design Group. They have put a lot of work and thought into what this building should look like. As far as timing, if you're going to go right into the second phase, I think they already have the conceptual knowledge and the knowledge of that building to continue on with the plans. So my recommendation is to continue on with the Hayes Design Group for phase two of this project.
Okay, I would agree. I mean, I think we need to stop thinking about this as two projects and think about it as one.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make sense to switch architects halfway through a single project. I think that, that is a discussion for the elementary center, for Neil Armstrong and for the elementary center that we build. But I think that when we talk about IMS, we should really be thinking about it as one project, not these two phases. I think that's kind of inaccurate and misleading.
Agreed. I think everything that Hayes laid out so far in phase two was very impressive. I think everyone was pretty much in agreement with what they had put forward to us, so I'm excited to see that.
A lot of nods.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it was great, and there's no sense in switching, to me.
I agree as well. I thought the renderings and the presentation of what again, the thought going into the classrooms, what those spaces, what they were creating there, thought it was well designed, well thought out. And if that scheme continues through the rest of the building, then yeah, I think it's going to be a really nice building.
and just for clarification purposes, can we say what the summer of 23 project would be for the rest of the public? I mean, it's now going to be a ramp and the second elevator, which we thought would be done this current summer, but based on Sitelogic, that might not be the way
Right.
it goes.
It's more likely they'll do the other elevator to the gym.
Right, and then which is better because then we're giving more people access to the basement, to the gym area. And then it is the remodel of upstairs being the restroom facilities, but there were other additional items that had to go into that. Can you?
Yeah, probably Kevin can address that a little better than I can.
Sure. So again, we will be, and we've already started with Sitelogic in terms of we shared all of the phase one and phase two information that we had with them. Their team's getting up to speed on that information, including the plans and including the narratives, et cetera. But in talking about it, generally, and again, I'm going to defer to Rick and Garrett to share very preliminary thoughts, but the idea would be that the sixth grade wing would be, as mentioned earlier, flex space. So we would probably take half of the second floor, move them into the sixth floor wing, and begin renovating that space. Again, always thinking of the safety of the students at all times, isolating the construction very completely, and also providing access for the contractors. So, and some of what we're talking, so we're going to be, the idea would be moving through the building. You know, once a space is done, move students back into it, and then use this flex space to move other students into that until you kind of work through your building. So for the most part, in the school year 2022, 2023, much of the educational spaces, much of the space of the building can be done. And then the second summer is going to be, again, those areas that are difficult to do because of their impact to the public areas, et cetera, during the school year. Those would be the focus of the second summer. And of course, wrapping things up. So Rick
And I guess, Kevin, maybe when we meet again in, February or March, maybe between you and Sitelogic, you'll have more of the, construction scheduling details worked out, and maybe you can provide us a little bit more definitive insight around the operational side, how we operate during this. But, I think that, everybody, on the board, the administration, this is like doing a renovation on your house. You should expect a little bit of inconvenience while you're going through construction. But I think this is a compressed time span, 18 months, and we won't have to do it again for 25 years. So I think the timing is good.
Yes.
Just one quick comment on that second summer is we do have a window from like mid-April till August to do all the heating and ventilating systems. So we can't turn the heat off in the middle of winter. So there'll be a big push. A significant portion of that work will be that infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And to Mr. Christensen's comment, yes, that is what Hayes Design Group, along with Sitelogic, will do. We'll basically develop phasing plans, which again we can bring back to you, and it'll probably be a little easier to see it visually, kind of going through the building in terms of this space, then this space, then this space. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so it sounds good. IMS is moving forward, and we'll get things going here very shortly within this month. So, next subject coming up is to our new option, reviewing our options for an elementary center, and thoughts on that. We also have some representatives here from the school district administration, and at some point they maybe have to give us some of their thoughts on that. But what do we want to do with a new elementary center? I know we had some discussion in regards to different locations, and I think we kind of narrowed it down to some type of development on the Neil Armstrong properties, which appears to be our best option. I think we're all in agreement with that.
Yes.
So the next point is we have present options presented to us here today. Regards with, I believe there's 3. And if there's any, we can have some discussion about what our thoughts about that.
So I have a question. This is actually going to the elementary leadership team that's here tonight. When we're looking at K-12 center with a 3-4-5 at Neil, when you're looking at educational outcomes, the desired outcomes that we really want to see, continuity of curriculum, programs, resources, if you guys could highlight advantages and disadvantages of both scenarios, either a K through 5, right, or the K-12 3-4-5. If you can highlight advantages and disadvantages, any of you, the more input, the better. If one person is throwing out ideas, if other ideas come up, I would love to hear from as many of you as possible.
You want to take the mic?
Take a microphone.
You have to turn it
Yeah.
on.
Well, you got the hand.
You can grab that
Hey,
one.
yeah, Kenny, go grab that, Mr. Patterson. Yeah, Andy will give you that one. Thank you. Thank you, Andy.
We've been talking about this as a group quite a bit at our administrative meetings. So, I think, Mr. Scalzo, in reference to your question specifically, there's a very natural difference between in learning when you're talking about students K-2 versus students 3-5. One of those that's really important, I think, to take note of is the independent reading ability of students. We really start to see that in third grade, students reading.
Jay, we can't hear you.
Oh,
You have to get really close to that mic.
oh, sorry. Is that better? All right.
Yes,
Really start
thank
to
you.
see that, you're welcome, Zeb. That independent reading with students in third grade. And then that sort of drives education from fourth grade on. When you get into middle school and high school, students are reading independently all the time for whatever subject area it might be. K to 2, that's really not the case. K to 2, you're still learning those foundational skills and providing interventions to try to get students to that level. And then in third grade, I think, is where you see some students are getting there, some students are still trying to. It's really sort of a transformative year in education. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a very natural break between K to 2 and 3 to 5. And I think we also see that reinforced by with the state expectations. The PSSA start in grade 3. So you have that element that would be more synonymous with a 3 through 5 environment, where the K to 2, that wouldn't exist. There you're still focusing on those foundational skills. So that's just the very first, I think when you're looking at education and the design of an educational program, that's the really big difference that comes to mind for me initially. And speaking for myself, I see it now and just in my building, which is a K to 4 building now. I think there's a really big difference that you see with the fourth graders versus the K to 3 students in the school. And I think that difference is even becoming more exacerbated as the years go on. As a society, we've I don't know if we've encouraged it, but we've allowed kids to grow up faster over the past few generations. That difference becomes more pronounced with students in fourth grade. And it's not a bad thing, but it's just different. Students that are in that K to 2, and then you could stretch it into K to 3, I think there's still a very distinct elementary feeling to their experience. And in fourth grade, there becomes a feeling among, I think, the student population after being there in that building. That's their 5th year that they're in that school. And with how society has changed, interests, pursuits, activities, everything that they're involved with becomes a little bit different in fourth grade. So for me, there's that educational piece that's important, but then there's also that social emotional piece as it relates to the fourth graders that I see now. Does anybody else want to? Because it might be 2 hours, but.
Yeah, hi. Fred Pearson, the principal at Washington Elementary, and I have a little bit of a different perspective, actually. When we found out a few different options, I just started thinking, and the more I think about it, I think programmatically the age range of the building, I don't see it being as important. Just because I think if you design a building that allows for students to be in their own areas, you can segregate students and still deliver the age-appropriate curriculum to those students. So I just have that little bit of a different perspective just because, I think younger kids also benefit from seeing older students, how they behave, how they act. They benefit from having older students in the building that can do things like the morning announcements. And they see that, and it's kind of a rite of passage that the older students get to do that because they're able to. So I don't know. I'm not so sure that that you can't do both. Having the larger building. Now it's a lot of kids, so that's really something that I think you have to think about when you're making this decision: is do you want 1,700 kids or 1,800 kids in one building? But really, you are having them on the same campus, and you have to deal with them all together at that property site. So, are you going to build a building that is state of the art, that is something unique to the South Hills community, maybe even in Pennsylvania, or are you going to renovate a building that you have and try to fit 2 buildings on that property that I think is going to be a challenge? Whereas if you had one building, it would allow for more space for play areas and parking and and just looking at the map. So I don't know, just advice. The other thing that really kind of hits home with me is I really value the neighborhood school that we have in Bethel Park. The system, the neighborhood school system that we have in Bethel Park, I think, is valuable in the fact that it gives, teachers and families the opportunity to know each other over years. So maybe your older brother or sister had this teacher, whereas if you're throwing all 14 sections of kindergarten into one area, those teachers don't get to know those families as well. So you could break the building up into neighborhoods as well and make them smaller segments if that's what you choose to do as well. I just think it's kind of you wouldn't have to lose that neighborhood perspective. Just a thought.
And that's funny, Mr. Pearson, when we did the feasibility study and we were talking about the buildings, there was a parent who was an advocate originally in the beginning for neighborhood schools, eventually come seeing since the district has resized, our student population is significantly lower than it was a few years ago. But that's one of the points she brought up, is that if we go with this one building concept, can we still maintain some type of neighborhood concept? So it's interesting because it was another parents' observations of trying to bring the best of both.
I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be 5 elementary schools. It could be even 3 or, even 2, where you have smaller, you could break it up.
But that was another thought, and then again, something we have to put in our process as we move forward with this.
And I think also as we move forward, you said something, it doesn't matter if it's one building, K to 5, or a K to 2, 3, 4, 5, or a K to 3, 4, 5, we are putting 1,700 kids in the Neil Armstrong campus on a daily basis in buses. Doesn't matter how we do it, that's what we're doing, because we have been told by numerous people, including Mr. McCausland, as you look at the numbers, we have to do something. We can't keep 5 neighborhood schools, we won't survive. And coming from somebody that, had siblings that grew up in the neighborhood schools and one went to one and one went to the other just because of overcrowding and the grade levels, it was nice, but you still don't walk. You still don't walk to any of those schools. So neighborhood schools, are kind of out in Bethel Park, just based on where you want to go. So if you can speak to that real quick, just on the financial end of.
Well, I think I can talk to the finances. Do you want me to go there now?
I just have a few more.
I think we're still talking about the.
It's still
I want to stick
conceptual
to
here.
Well, I think first we should talk about the education and the student experience, and then maybe we could shift over and talk about economics.
Yeah.
So just my idea on the neighborhood school wasn't necessarily because you could walk to a place, but it's that relationship of a teacher and a family that I think is really important, because when you have 2 or 3 kids in a family, you get to know them intimately, and there's a lot of value in that. That's all.
I think we value
that. I agree with those benefits. One of the things that we heard loud and clear, over the last couple of years, and as we went through the strategic planning process, is that class size equality is important. That's really hard to do with 5 schools because of changing enrollments from building to building, and we see these large class sizes of 25, small class sizes of 16, and it's really hard to manage. I think the other thing that we've seen, and this became just incredibly clear as we went through the strategic planning process, we have a really hard time implementing consistent curriculum across all 5 buildings. And that's something that, you just look at our reading programs. I mean, they're different everywhere. And, that should not be due to local schools. I mean, we've got, our students have, more or less the same needs and should be given the same curriculum. So I mean, from my standpoint, I just don't see how neighborhood schools help us achieve some of the other academic goals that we have. I also see, frankly, some challenge is also just maintaining them financially going into the future.
Yep, I agree with Mr. Christensen. My decision, I think, at this point is kind of coming down to which of those three centers that we're choosing. And really my thought process is, okay, on one hand, what do you all believe is the best building structure to provide the best quality of education that we can give to our students? But on the other hand, I think you kind of have to weigh the economic standpoint, because any money that we're putting into, say, a K-5 center that's costing $24 million, we're not able to put into the education of our students. So just a question as to a K-2 versus a K-3 center. I know maybe some of you feel differently about how important it is to separate based on that kind of like K-2 early elementary versus a later elementary. The difference comes out to about $200,000 a year. I know that's probably a really hard question for you to try to answer, but could you try to just kind of think about what you could possibly utilize those resources for versus having a K-2 versus a K-3 building, or if having a K-2 to K-3 building even matters to you at all? I know some of you touched on that a little bit already.
So essentially, is it worth it? Is the additional cost to add on?
Right, would you rather have that?
Grade 3 to Neil?
Would you prefer to have that little extra money to use for maybe additional teachers or additional resources for students, or would having that building structure actually be advantageous?
The additional money is associated with adding the third grade to the structure?
Exactly. The K-3 setup would be a little bit cheaper, roughly $200,000 per year.
To me, as I referenced earlier, I think the natural break comes in that K-2 and then the 3 to 5 setting. That's just my personal opinion, my belief in what I see every day. And I think that makes the most sense. I don't think having third grade in that setting and going K-3 is disadvantageous, because I really see third grade as being that transition year for students before they move into more of that 4th, 5th, 6th grade mindset. So I don't think it's an error to go K-3 by any stretch. But if you're asking me, and I mean, my personal opinion is that K-2 would be the way that you create a very structured and rigorous primary learning center. And to Mr. Christensen's point earlier about the fidelity of curriculum and things like that, it's so much more advantageous, I think, in order to be able to achieve that, to have that committed primary learning center where your educational leaders in that building can really focus on K-2 instruction and become curriculum experts in grades K, 1, and 2. In a K-5 setting, I think you become more of a manager and a delegator and trying to put out fires as they arise naturally at education. But when you have that incredibly focused structure in a building, whether it be K-2 or 3 to 5, I think you give your educational leaders in those buildings a real opportunity to also become curriculum leaders, which we are and should be. It allows us to really focus, I think, and make that a better process for our teachers and for everybody involved. I think Mr. Patterson wants to talk here.
I came from a background where we had a K-8 building in Washington, PA, about 1,200 students in that building, which we then went down to a K-6 building, 7th and 8th grade moved up, and we had a lot of the similar discussions that we're having today about what's right, where kids belong, and what grade level. And one of the arguments I always had was I always told people I would much rather have my kindergartner not exposed to middle school students than my middle school students exposed to high school students, because I always tell people nowadays everything that we knew and did as children has moved back about 3 years. So what my 6th graders I'm dealing with were our 9th grade, so just think about that for a minute. But the reality is I think the K-2, 3 to 5 is the natural break there. As far as money goes, I mean, part of this process is right sizing, I guess, again, and talking about that. So there's probably going to be loss of staff within this already. I mean, if we're going to put that money directly back into staff, then 100%, I think it's always, because reading specialists, counselors, people like that are always at the top of our priority list when we talk in principals meetings and everything. Offering 3 to 5, right now, for anybody who has kids who went through NAMS and for years before I got there, I'm running 2 buildings. I'm running an elementary 5th grade and a middle school 6th grade. Yeah, the opportunity to run one elementary 3 to 5 with teams working together, if I'm the person who even does that. But the reality is, I think the 3 to 5 age group works well with 2 teacher teams, where teachers can really become experts in an area, and do more. K-2 lends itself more to the self-contained environment, even though that might be negotiable even in second grade. I think we're able to do a lot of things in 5th grade when they come to us, and that exposure to 2 teachers, the movement and everything, I think is really good for them. And having 2 kids myself, 8th and 10th grade, I think that 3rd through 5th is very appropriate for that, and I think we could do a lot. A lot of my issues and concerns are much more facilities related, relationship related, and things like that. When you go bigger, you lose relationships. The number one thing, and these guys talked about it in some capacity, but even as a principal with 2 grade levels at Bethel Park and 600 kids, I don't know all the kids' names, and that's frustrating to me. I'm not one of those, like, we don't divide up, like IMS divides up 7th and 8th grade, a principal for each grade. I don't do that. And it's not because I want to have all the answers and everything. It's just because I feel like I want to be part of that for all those kids. When you go K-5 and you divide us all up, we're not going to know those kids. And so I think the smaller buildings lend itself to that. The issues I see are very much what I already deal with Neil and the campus, and we talked about parking. It's going to be huge. Any events that we have there, concerts, things like that. I'm looking at these renderings and I'm shaking my head just because I know what parking looks like and why we do things at the high school and things like that. Parent conferences, I mean, when we have open houses, things like that, you're looking, I mean, I was trying to count the little squares there to see, and I mean, it's just, you got 1 grade level of 300 and you know everybody in elementary shows up to the conferences. So there's a lot of logistical issues. Sharing staff, I mean, we're going to be across the campus. We can still share staff. There's a lot of advantageous scenarios when it comes to staffing and things like that. But the reality is, I think if you go bigger is not always better. And I think that's where I'm really stuck on looking at this and trying to run that even as a head principal and 3 head principals or whatever it ends up being. That's a real challenge. And I think that the grade level is naturally aligned based on, honestly, experience. And being in a K-8 building, I've watched, and Jay spoke to it a lot about learning to read and then reading to learn and things like that. I mean, that's what you're really looking at, and getting those core skills and the resources and remediation and things like that they do K-2 would look different than maybe 3 to 5. And that's, I think it is a good time to make that change, even from the perspective of counselors and everything else. I think even down to 3rd grade, I mean, these guys have been begging for counselors. Well, at least we might have that for 3rd grade then, and maybe social workers still. I mean, but obviously if there's extra money, $200,000, that'll get 1 teacher maybe, I guess. But so I mean, I think whatever we do, I mean, you have a great admin team here who's going to make it work, but I think that from my perspective, the 2 smaller buildings, even for scheduling purposes, because you're going to be running 2 different bell schedules if you go K-5. So that creates its own problems. Then you have days where you're PSSA testing and all these shared teachers can't cover and can't be there. And there's a lot of other scenarios. Like when I do a PSSA schedule, it's a 3-hour delay schedule. Well, that's not, K-2 would be totally in all the readings, but everybody tests. So there's going to be a lot of things like that. The band scheduling, string scheduling for 4 and 5 are going to impact then everybody else. So there's a lot of things we do 3 to 5, 4 to 5 especially, that will impact K-2 negatively as far as scheduling and sharing staff and everything. So.
When you were talking about sharing staff, do you think when you're talking about K-5 or K-1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in either scenario, is it advantageous or maybe not, or it doesn't matter for social workers, guidance counselors, school psychologists, ESL, for special ed, gifted, learning, any students that have learning disabilities, physical disabilities, emotional support, you know, just overall communication, if that was all housed under one roof, I know it's a bigger setting, would that be an advantage for supports for our students, that they're housed there every day in the same place? Or doesn't it matter that much when you're looking at maybe the K-1-2 and the 3-4-5 still being on the same campus. What are your thoughts on that? Just anybody can answer, all of you can answer.
Real quick, and I'll get rid of it. I don't think it matters as much to me because, I mean, again, you're going back to relationships. And if you have a learning support teacher and you're in a K-5 building and you're trying to spread that learning support teacher as thin as you can to get all the teaching periods you can out of her, and he or she's doing 3 different grade levels, you actually lose those relationships and you lose some of that continuity and everything like that. So I think it takes away sometimes those relations. I'm a relationship guy. Like I think those are that's how kids learn. That's how kids succeed. That's how kids get better at what they do. And the bigger you go, the less relationships there's going to be. And I mean, as far as sharing, yeah, I mean, it would probably be easier to share people under one roof. But again, you're sharing among a lot more people and not quite getting the level of service that I think we could provide in a smaller setting. So,
can I ask a question about age range restrictions? I know I'm a high school teacher, but there's a 4-year age range restriction in the high school, and I believe a 3-year, right, K through 6. So we would really have to keep those kids split, right? Or am I?
Are you referencing special education?
Yeah.
Like the age, yes.
Well, yeah, and specials too. I thought that even having more than 3 years from K to 6 with
in a special education setting, right?
Yeah.
There's age ranges that we have to be aware of relative to the classrooms that we create.
Right.
For students. But in response to Mr. Scalzo's question too, I think a lot of those things that he identified, I don't know that you would. Like an emotional support setting in grade 3 and for grades 3 through 5 and grades K through 2, I think is going to look very different. Because of the type of child that you're working with. Same thing goes with guidance and social work. I mean, if we were in a K to 5 setting versus a K to 2 and a 3 to 5, I think you're still probably looking at the same amount of guidance counselors / social workers, whether you're all housed under one roof or not, just because of the volume of students that you're looking at that need services. So the benefits that we can garner from sharing staff in a K to 5 setting, whether it's on a campus with 2 different buildings or in one building, I think are achievable either way. And those benefits are typically, I think, when I look at it from a building scheduling perspective, you'll see them as it relates to the scheduling of special area classes, because those are the things year to year that our sections rise and fall, and so sometimes we need 1 or 2 more art sections or 1 or 2 more phys ed sections and things like that. Well, that's easy to share those teachers on the same campus, on a annual basis, depending on the needs at each of those buildings. So I don't think there's necessarily a benefit to be in the K to 5 environment in order to garner that benefit. The one other thing I wanted to mention, because I heard earlier talking about, well, either way, we have 1,700 students on the same campus, but one of my biggest concerns when first looking through this work is the safety and how we respond to emergency situations. And one big benefit that I see from having the 2 separate buildings on the same campus is we each then have a built-in rally point, so to speak. Not only a rally point, but a weather protected rally point for students should we have to evacuate one of the buildings. And a big concern for me if we go with a 1 K to 5 building, on that campus, is that there's really not an ideal place to go nearby in that area for a severe emergency. There's no big churches like there are near some of our other buildings. Maybe we have to look into it a little bit more. But when I look at it from an operations perspective and somebody that's responsible for the safety of the kids in the building, I like the idea that I have, like the relationship that exists now between IMS and the high school, that we have a place nearby that we can go to and maintain the safety of the kids, especially when we're talking about kids that are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, because we can't rely on them like we can high schoolers to be responsible and self-reliant during some of those situations. We have to have a very structured and highly monitored situation for them in the event of emergencies. Come on, T.
I just wanted to bring up the social emotional learning of our students, especially seeing the impact these past 2 years have had on them. I believe that K-2, they're still forging those relationships, learning how to, learn about themselves, how to get along with their peers. Lincoln and Franklin have piloted SAP, Student Assistance Program, from last year. This is our second year. And with the use of our social workers, we've seen their caseloads grow with the needs, the mental health needs of our students. And I believe if the building is smaller, K-2, we can foster those relationships, those healthy relationships, coping skills that we're focusing on a daily basis. I see it in my kindergarteners, my first graders, mostly at the primary level. Academics is very important, but I feel that the mental health well-being, will promote academics. If a child is not healthy in their mind, then they can't focus on academics, and that's really important at the primary level.
I agree, and for me, I don't want anyone to lose the kinds of relationships that families have with you. Get a little choked up, because that is so important, particularly at the elementary level. And you're right, that is what we value. That is valued in our community. And for me, I want to make sure that whatever structure we have going forward, it is structured to preserve your ability to do that. Because I don't want you to not ever know the family, because you only dealt with them this one year, and maybe 3 years later you run into them again. I want to find a way to make those connections continue in a different structure. And I totally agree with you about the social emotional learning, because children cannot learn and grow academically if they do not feel safe and secure in a place of belonging and welcome. And particularly in elementary school, that's where it starts. We have to develop this in a way that gives the correct foundation and beginning for those relationships to grow. I'm on board with ensuring that.
But even if we did a K through 5, it would be split up. I mean, the kids aren't going to be together. You could never have K and 5 together. So even if we did one big giant, it's split. And I would not be in favor of communal places in this, because I think that age range is entirely too big. But as far as a big campus goes, I think that maybe because I work in a district that has a building that connects, so it's 6th all the way to 12th that connects, but we never ever see the other schools. So I think we have to stop looking at it like it's everybody in one slot all day long, But
you can use
agree.
a building design to,
yeah, right.
to take care of those things.
Yeah, for
but
sure. Yeah, but I do agree with the relationships and all.
So just to quick review, the way we're moving forward, we are going to build a new elementary center. I mean, that's a given. Everyone understands that. One of the hangups will be whether, if it's a K-2, that means 3, 4, 5 at the present Neil Armstrong. But if I'm correct, Mr. Hayes, and the information you brought to us, we would have to put for additional space classrooms onto that structure, correct? If we were to make the present Neil Armstrong 3, 4, 5, we would have to put an addition onto that.
That's correct.
All right? And then that in itself has its own questions if we were to move forward on that. Then the other option is, like I said, the K-5. I think the educational value they can bring in, and like you were saying, Buffy, we can get those separate wings and apart. Other schools have done that, maybe not a size of 1,500 kids plus, but I think what that can be accomplished is just that, it's either one big building or K-3. That's it. And thank you, folks, for presenting your information, but the K-2 is one area, 3, 4, 5 is another. And that's what I'm kind of hearing from you folks, is that there's a separation you'd like to see along those lines by grade levels. Which would mean then 3, 4, 5 would have to bring us to an addition to the present Neil Armstrong for the 3rd grade.
Can we ask
Hey, Jim?
Yes, Mr. Christensen.
We saw, we heard some of the, academic pros and cons for the different situations for the administrators. We talked a little bit about the student experience just now. I think it would be relevant to talk about, the financial views next? Because I think that, all three of these areas need to be taken into account when we select an option.
Mr. Christensen, before we move into financials, we've got several people here that I know have to be at work again tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Can we ask about the structural site issues that we had going, that we have asked them to be here for?
Sure.
Meaning the retention planning and those kinds of things that would fall
Sure.
under
Yep.
so they could, be home. The only other thing I wanted to mention is, there were some things about, staffing issues. We need to tell everyone right now that there's not going to be a reduction in staffing issues as we move to a K2 building, 3, 4, 5, or a K-5 building. Based on the geological, or we had somebody come in about genetics and how many students we have and where our population growth is going to be.
Demographics.
Yes, demographics. We know that there will be anywhere from 275 to 300 students per grade level for the next 10 years on the incoming kindergarten class, and that was proven this year based on how many kindergarten kids came in last year and this year. So the staffing is not, so I want to clarify that with the public, with the, Teachers Federation. That's not where we're going with this. So just for point of clarification. Mr. Christian is here, Mr. Myrie is here. We have asked a couple of different questions. I think, Mr. Hayes, my first question is to you. There was significant water retention done on the back end of Neil Armstrong Middle School several years ago. What is the structural process with Neil Armstrong Middle School with that water that had to be done in the building of the Saddlebrook?
I'm not familiar with that, Mrs. Turner.
Can you guys clarify? I know that there were some water issues that had to be addressed years ago at Neil Armstrong on the back end of the building where there is now trees. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with anything surrounding that circumstances. I have to do some research on that one.
Okay. And in that, what is the structure? We're looking at about $20 million that would have to go into NAMS to make it a 3-4-5 or even a 4-5 building. That is 15 years. We are not going to repeat what we did at the high school or other boards did at the high school years prior, where we took that campus down to its bones and then said, oh no, we can't do it anymore and we have to build a new building. Making mistakes over and over again is not where this board or we want to take that community in general again. So
Sure.
How do we know that the structure at NAMS is going to last through what might have to be redone at the new elementary center that we would build?
Sure. So am I hearing you right, Ms. Turner, that you're saying that the current board would like to avoid what happened in the 90s with the high school? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, again, because I've been in K-12 educational design for over 30 years, and I live 3 minutes from the high school, I'm very familiar with what happened at that time. And because our firm was the architect who came in the mid-2000s to look at a new high school, we had to assess the existing high schools. And so what I can tell the board right now is, unfortunately for the school district, I'm hoping I'm not the first person to have to tell you this, but the $37 million spent on the 8 high school buildings when it was a multiple building campus was not spent well. So there were mechanical issues in the 90s and electrical issues in the 90s and plumbing issues in the 90s that were not addressed with the $38 million that was spent on the high school. So 15 years later, when we came in, the issue was a lot of money was spent making those buildings look nice but not work well. So that was the issue there. In the case of NAMS, what we can tell you is a couple things. First, and let's be clear, let's take a step back just for a moment. When we did our assessment of that building, it was at 30,000 feet, okay? So it was a thorough review. We talked to district administration staff, including your director of maintenance. We talked to the school administration staff. We talked to the school janitors and got from them, what do you know about the building? And wherever they said, well, we've had this issue or that issue, our team of our architects, engineers, looked at all those issues in more detail. We also went through the building and we assessed what we could see. So what we can tell you is, from a review of the drawings, at that level, at a high level, is the building, both IMS and NAMS, are built like a fortress. So structurally, they're solid buildings and they're going to last decades from a structural standpoint. What I can't comment on is if there's, I don't know anything about this water issue, because nobody from the district mentioned doing anything.
I was just told by others that.
Sure, but my point is.
And, you know, community members that
Right.
had concerns about
Yes.
what was done.
And if that's, because that's new information, and if we need to look at the building in more detail, we can certainly do that. But when, again, during the assessment of the building for the feasibility study, again, high level, so my point is, we don't know everything about those systems. Just as we did with IMS, you know, when we moved forward with phase one at IMS, we took a much deeper look at all the systems in the building to verify them. So is that helping?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And the only other thing I would say, maybe just globally, is the $16.5 million that we, you know, assigned to the cost in February of last year was for a 20-plus year renovation. That is, all the measured systems of the building would be renovated for 20 years. And again, in commercial K-12 design, that is the typical life of most of the building systems, such as mechanical systems, electrical systems, roofing systems, window systems, finishes, and the like. So that's kind of the design. And so in all the districts we work in, you know, we recommend, like, the district has to look at their buildings in a 20-year cycle. Structure is longer than that, right? You build foundations, you build, you know, structural columns and wall framing, et cetera. That's going to last 50, 60, 100 years.
So electrical wiring and plumbing, are you saying that with the 16 million, all electrical and all plumbing would be replaced?
Well,
because it's about
yes, with a caveat. First of all, the board has information that what's listed on that is included in the $16.5 million. It lists all the recommended items to create. Now, the only caveat, Mr. Scalzo, to your point is, 8 years ago, we did a major HVAC renovation at NAMS. And as part of that, some of the ceilings and some of the lighting was replaced as part of that, as well as the mechanical renovation. So that is not included in the 16.5. Those would be 20-plus year systems that are in there.
I guess I'm looking at it as like a pie chart. And NAMS, you're looking at 100%, right? So how much of this pie, when spending 16 million, is going to really replace a lot of the 60-year-old stuff that's in there? Like, what's going to be left that's 60 years old possibly in this building?
Your foundation walls, your floor structure, your terrazzo floors, your steel columns, your steel beams, your floor structure, your roof structure.
And that's 16 million will cover that.
No, I'm saying that stays.
Okay.
The 16
Wait,
million is everything I don't know if we want to go over it, but it's all.
No, I see what you're saying.
Replace electrical distribution system, replace fire alarm system, replace automatic sprinkler system, replace 2 existing elevators. I mean, all that gets replaced in the 16 million.
Do we also know for sure there's absolutely no asbestos anywhere in this facility?
No, we don't.
What about mold as well, possibly? Because, again, I don't know about if there are water issues or mold issues. As soon as you crack it open, then what happens with that price?
Yeah. Well, again, let's talk about relative. Again, the district has an annual AHERA, which is your hazardous materials report. And within there was nothing major identified. Now, again, as we did with IMS, and as we would recommend for NAMS, a new and more detailed evaluation of hazardous materials would be recommended. Again, now if the district is interested in doing that now, we could do that now. But, you know, in terms of this study, we took the information that you guys already have, because you have to update that yourselves every year. So
If you choose to renovate NAMS, Much of this would likely be able to fall under the GISA structure again, where you would identify those things and come up with a cost and eliminate change orders on those issues. It would probably more likely be a hybrid type project that they talked about, because if you put the addition onto NAMS, it's likely that the addition would not fall under GISA. It would have to be a traditional structure, traditional bid with the low bidder, but very likely, since you're updating a lot of the systems in the building, much of the renovation of NAMS could be a GISA structure.
Good, excellent. Good
Okay,
point.
I really want to get to Mr. Christian.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, we had asked that you be here tonight because of the water issues that we know are on the campus site at Neil Armstrong, and working with the borough to meet all of the coding that would have to happen to put either a K-5 brand new structure on there, and you have both sets of plans. Where do we starting point, need to comply, all those kinds of things process?
So in attendance with me right here tonight is also a municipal planner, KP Kirsten Prim. We could not bring Robert Hicks, our commercial construction code officer. He is home with again, another COVID victim, so we brought our residential building inspector, Vince Kelly. Some of the things that we've identified just tonight is, I don't know about the flooding, but that's tonight. Tomorrow we're going to get in earnest, do some research on that one. The plans, we're just kind of seeing those firsthand but some of the things that we've identified just tonight. KP is conducting a full rewrite of the zoning ordinance. Some of the things that we've added just in the discussions and hearing tonight, we identified potentially some temporary housing structure needs that for the district may need during the renovations. So add that one. At every residential district and also elsewhere within the municipality, we've already added that one to the code to make sure that the district will be in compliance with the new zoning ordinance. That way there'll be no backups, or holdups is a better way of saying it. Some of the things that we're looking at, staffing structure for building inspections, making sure that we are compliant and stay on timeline with the district when we are in the build or the renovations. Some of the things also is lot coverage. We want to make sure that we do not exceed any lot coverage requirements for pervious, impervious surfaces. We're looking at that one as we speak right now. Parking, making sure we're good for any of the requirements going to the new zoning ordinance. Building height, we talked about pervious, impervious, and then that research for that flood or in the stormwater management, that's got us baffled right now. So we owe you some answers, and I don't have them right now.
Okay, and I think it was just more to start this process because we all need answers. Again, trying not to make some of the same missteps that were made with the high school.
Yeah.
Right, and if I can jump in again, if it's helpful, and I hope that it is, I think that it's important to see the feasibility study for what it was, right? We were looking at certain criteria. How can we make the district-wide financially sustainable? What kind of educational curriculum needs to make all of the schools 21st century learning environments, to excite and inspire the students? How can we achieve a classroom size equity? How can we achieve service? So those are big issues that we started with. I think my sense is where we are tonight is we've made a lot of progress. The board has made a lot of progress in narrowing down, what master plan options. Like Mr. Scalzo, some of your questions, if there are particular questions that would help the board in your discernment process and in terms of, what things are important, how might they impact your choice of which option, then maybe we just need to do a little bit more work.
I'm worried about NAMS just because I think of it as a used car, and we're going to get beat up on this. We're going to get beat up on this every month. It's going to be in the shop. It's a 60-year-old plus building. How thorough of a job is it going to be? If you're talking about that $23 million difference from K through 5, roughly somewhere
Ballpark, yeah.
right around there. Will that 16 million start to grow over the next 20 or 30 years because of other potential things that can go wrong with NAMs, or even when you crack the building open. I'm just worried that one of my big concerns is if that used car price gets too close to the new car price, you made a big mistake.
Okay.
You know, and
Sure.
that's where my mindset is right now. I want to make sure that we get the best value and that we don't waste taxpayer dollars on this. That we are going to get a long-term future where we're not going to get beat up over and over and over again and not make mistakes of the past.
To that concern, I would say, you know, your high school building is now 10 years old. It's going to start to have things that aren't going to work. When you buy your home, there are always things that you're constantly having to update, refresh, repair. It just happens with buildings and systems. The best strategy you'll have moving forward is to not fall into the trap of prior boards where you didn't spend any money or didn't plan responsibly to maintain those buildings over the 20-year life cycle of that building, so that you don't find yourself 20 years down the road saying, oh my gosh, we didn't do anything to fix anything or update anything in 20 years. We now need to borrow another $40 million to fix it. That is a bigger issue. I mean, you're always going to have those things that break and need repaired and need updated. That's inevitable in any structure. So I think the best advice to you would be make sure you're planning responsibly, and that's part of what we're trying to get at with building a long-range budget, a long-range facilities master plan. You know, all of these decisions are going to help us get those fine-tuned so that we're not finding ourselves 20 years down the road with buildings that are in disrepair.
But in fairness to Mr. Scalzo, and again, just a little bit of historical context, when we looked at the options for the new high school in 2007, it was an option of renovating all of the existing buildings and looking at, okay, what did they need, which was a lot of mechanical, electrical, plumbing work, but there were other things. And at that time, it was the case that the board at that time, I'm going off my memory, but essentially the preliminary estimates were about $70 million to renovate the 8 buildings and keep what you had, but really make them 20-plus year buildings going forward. And the new high school was $90 million, and the board at that time felt, yes, that difference did not justify renovating the existing. It was worth spending it and getting a new high school. So, yeah, I mean, to your point, it's a valid one, and I think it goes back to, again, is there something, you know, what more do you need to know? And again, maybe, do we need to scratch beneath the surface a little bit to find out some things to, address those concerns? I mean,
Kevin, if I can just add one item to that, back in 2007, another area that was a consideration was school safety. Essentially, we had 124 doors wide open on that campus with the 8 buildings. So that was another consideration with having a safe school, and it didn't make sense to keep a campus, especially in Western PA where it's so lovely and warm all year round.
That's very true.
So I think, thank you, everybody. You know, we covered educational, we covered some things about the buildings and that, but I think, and there was a nice segue, Vince, in regards to cost. So, Mr. McCausland, are we able to start talking some projected costs for this option?
Sure. I don't know. This was put together by Hayes. I think you've seen something like this before. It went through the different options and kind of gave you a projected conceptual project cost for the different scenarios you're talking about. So if you're looking at, and Kevin, please step in here if I don't cover something correctly, but in option 8.1 basically is showing you the costs for the K-2 primary center and reconfiguring NAMS into a 3, 4, 5 building. Looking at the total cost there, we're looking at about $69 million. If we were to, using today's numbers, it would cost us about $3.1 million annually in additional debt service. The conceptual savings are savings from operational and staffing realignments that you would save by consolidating buildings, And then those net costs down there on a high-low range are basically your savings on an annual basis in your budget. So you can see.
Hey, Doug or Kevin, just one question, and I can't remember, we probably talked about this, months ago, but when we're talking about a primary center, does kindergarten assume all-day kindergarten? Or are the assumptions here, there's enough classrooms to still only do half-day kindergarten?
Yeah, the feasibility study kept it at a half-day kindergarten.
Okay.
So these are based on that, in terms of the space requirements.
And there may be, have to revisit, because I think we've had some discussion about looking at the potential of a full-time program, half-time program, but we'll get to that.
Yes, if that's the direction of the board, again, all of the plans we developed had a potential to add classrooms to allow full grade kindergarten, and it just would be the matter of the board.
I just think with the composition of this board, that may be a talking point for
Okay.
us to.
Sure.
Prior to when you presented your information to us, it was a different talking point.
Yeah, and I think, probably our initial direction while we were completing the community survey and everything, Kevin, was, to assume half-day, but we probably never updated you on, some of the results and feedback we got back in terms of priorities. So, I don't think we should come up with 5 more options, okay, that all have full-day kindergarten. Let's get to an option that we like, and then we'll address what an additional full-day kindergarten would be.
Agreed. I think it would change all 3 options the same way, so I don't think it really matters a whole lot in our decision.
Okay, Doug?
So yeah, just again, I kind of skimmed over there and I wanted to point out the 47 million represents the new building. The 16 million is the renovations to NAMS that we talked about. Okay.
And Doug, if I could, sorry to jump in.
Go ahead.
The only thing on the option is, again, it says it there, is the 47 million included the additional space at NAMS for the 3rd grade edition. We're just looking at it being like the new construction cost in that.
Thank you for that
It's listed there.
clarification. So when they did an option 8.2, which is a little bit different because we did hear some concerns about the fact that, we're really concentrating on NAMS and making it a solid building to function for the next 20 years and deliver your programs. But if you wanted to worry more about the exterior and interior aesthetic look, we could do some additional renovations to make it look newer and fresher in the building. That would probably add an additional $4 million to that project cost. So that's what we're estimating. It does increase your debt service slightly to $3.25 million, and you can see that the savings are reduced slightly as a result. When you go into option 9.1, which is a K-3 primary center, and then, am I missing something? K-3 primary center, and NAMS would be renovated with grades, should that be 4 and 5?
I think that's supposed to be 4 or 5, isn't it?
That is supposed to be 4 and 5.
Okay. That K-3 center would be about $43 million, and again, your $16 million to renovate NAMS. Total on that project is just under $65 million. It lowers your annual debt service to about $2.8 million, and then you can see the savings as a result. Again, if you wanted to do more aesthetic improvements to NAMS, it adds that $4 million in, and it increases from $2.8 million in debt service to about $3 million. So kind of middle of the road of the two. And then finally, the K-5 center, that's about a $96.2 million endeavor. It's going to increase your debt service by $3.5 million and pretty much eliminate any savings.
Doug and Kevin, I had a question on that number. All the other annual financing numbers, they're about 4.5% of the total investment. That one's 3.5%. So I think that number might be wrong, because I don't know why our financing rates would change or the terms.
It could be because some of the numbers. Yeah, some of the numbers earlier were taken from PNC in a prior run they did for me, and then we had them update it. So they might have been taken from different time periods. We didn't go back and there were so many permutations on this that, it's very possible that the interest rates might be slightly different.
Apples to apples, if all the other scenarios assumed about 4.5, your annual financing cost would be about 4.5% of your total expense, then this one should be 4.5 million in that area, not 3.5 million.
You know what, I
So
think
$1 million
you are
more than-
correct. I think I might even typed it wrong. I think I probably took the debt service over 2 years and I missed the first year of funding. So I might have forgot to put it's very possible I made a typo there.
Right, and as it's written, it also should say a negative 200,000 on there. It would be a $200,000 additional cost, as opposed to a savings like the other items were. That's like one thing I want to point out, because whenever I went through this the first time, you see net cost to operating budget, so you think a higher number is worse, you're increasing your operating budget more, but how this is presented, and Mr. McCausland did say that, but all these numbers are cost savings, as compared to just updating our existing buildings. So any net cost to operating budget, a larger number is more beneficial to us here.
And the other thing I have to show you is just what does that mean in terms of millage rate impact, fund balance impact, and how your fund balance changes from year to year from operations. If you look at the other tabs, I have a lot of detail in there for the years. I did it for each model, trying to keep everything consistent except for the debt service number, which changed. Looking at that, you can see that the millage impact is pretty much the same regardless of what option you choose in the first 2 years. Where you make the difference is in the third year. You're going to have to, if you use the K-5 option, you're going to have to continue to raise millage in the third year to meet operational and debt service requirements. With the other two options, whether you do a K2 or K3, you can see that you are back on track in the third year. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to go into the hole. It just means that remember that you have a limited ability to raise the tax millage due to the PDE index each year. It may mean you have to dip into some of your fund balance to fund the first year, or we can look at structuring the debt in a manner in which we defer some of the payments until a later year so that you can raise your millage to the level where you can actually fund those bond payments. So we have a lot of creativity we can do. I just wanted to show you basically based on the cost of the debt, what the overall millage impact potentially could be and how it's different between the different options. K2, again, very similar. You can see on the graph with the millage rates, they're all pretty much the same in the first 2 years, but the K5 option obviously continues to increase millage to meet that, where the other two are pretty close and pretty even. You can see that you're going to be in the negative. That's also pending that we have other things to manipulate in the budget. But again, I just wanted to show you what the impact on the debt service would be on your overall operations. Currently, you're sitting at a little over $20 million in fund balance, and that would drop, somewhat significantly over the next couple years. But keep in mind, we do have fund balance reserved for capital projects, and so we wouldn't be putting the district in financial distress with either option. I just wanted to see the dramatic difference between funding a K5 and a K2-3.
Yeah, and I think, Doug, I think it's probably reasonable to assume that, some of those dollars in our capital fund, we would have used those if we were going to, decide to fix up our existing buildings. So to apply those capital funds to this new construction, I think is reasonable, don't you?
I agree.
Mr. McCausland, is there any knowledge of what kind of funding we could expect from the state with the new construction?
You will get none. There is no plan con that exists from the state anymore. So we will not be going through a plan con process because it does not exist. So you will not be eligible for any reimbursement on this project.
Answers that.
That's an easy one.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think there may be some confusion, and, didn't you tell me this, Doug, that at the state level, they are working on a program for PlanCon, but they actually didn't put any money behind it, okay?
That's
So
correct.
something like that. So people may have heard news about a PlanCon program. It's just not funded. Probably won't be either.
Right, that's
That's
very.
political progress.
Right.
As of now, there's only one person in that office in that department, in Pennsylvania Department of Education.
Barry, if I can read you what I got back, it says the best place to find such information would be the PDE website, and directed to PlanCon 2. However, there is no money in PlanCon 2, and there's a continued moratorium on accepting new projects into this program, and it has not been funded. So the school district wants to start a new construction project now. There is no state reimbursement available.
Right.
So I have a question for you, Mr. McCausland.
Sure.
So for educational programs, other resources, if it's cycling through new computers or just resources in general for any of our courses, across the district, would any of those options, regardless which one we pick, would it impact them in a negative way with any of the ones that we pick?
All right, I'll answer that this way. I'll say, if you're asking me what makes the most sense financially, I don't think there's a huge difference between the K2 or K3 option. It's really where you feel more comfortable with the configuration of the grades. I don't know that the additional cost for building a K5 is counterbalanced by the difference you're going to see in academic achievement. For me, now remember, I'll preface this by saying I have a finance degree and an accounting degree, but I also have an education degree and have been in the classroom. So I would tell you that achievement happens with instruction in the classroom and solid curriculum and good structure and good, presentation of that curriculum and working with kids one-on-one. It's not the building that achieves that. So is it money well spent is it worth the additional $20-30 million to build a K-5 building? Will you get what you're trying to achieve in your strategic plan from an achievement standpoint, a student achievement standpoint, and a student experience standpoint by spending that money? My answer would be no, you won't. I think you're better served to take some of that money you would have spent on bond debt payments and say, let's invest in staff development for our teachers that's quality. Let's invest in computer devices that really our students can use, better curriculum that our students can use. That money is better spent to achieve your goals and your strategic plan rather than spending it on debt. That's where I'm coming from in a big picture.
No, I understand that. I get that. I definitely get that. I'm worried about, again, probably comes back to talking with Mr. Hayes about what are we going to crack into once we're in the building, and then if those costs start to go up, right? It could be a nightmare scenario possibly if we don't know what you're getting into, and then you're going from 16 million to what? 20 million, maybe 25 million. You're getting up to 30 million. Again, that's the part I'm most worried about when spending that money. The unknown, not knowing for sure. Maybe you can help us get there and explain if there's possible asbestos or if there's other issues. I don't know. I just almost need assurances. I don't want to put money into something that's going to hurt us later. I just want to make sure that there's assurances there.
I guess to maybe ask a more direct question to maybe help with that a little bit, so you put a roughly 20-year period on those, improvements and replacements at NAMS, correct? So are there any, large cost pieces that you would potentially anticipate degrading over time during those 20-year period that could lead to significant costs that a new building, perhaps wouldn't? I know you're replacing electrical, you're replacing plumbing. I mean, those are a lot of your big cost items, HVAC, et cetera, but anything else that you can potentially anticipate?
Generally, no. I mean, the overall major renovation of the building would address all major building systems for 20 years. So your roof, your windows, again, plumbing, again, mechanical, electrical was done. $8 million was already spent there 7 years ago. So generally speaking, I mean, I think another way of asking your question, am I getting it, is there a big pothole you could hit, after the renovation in the next 20 years that would, you have to think $1 million or $2 million?
If I'm understanding your concerns correctly, Vince.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, at this point, I would say no, but again.
Right, I understand
given
nothing is
what the board's
impossible.
talking about, again, there is a limitation to the 30,000-foot level of assessment we did for the feasibility study. It
Right.
wasn't, hey, we're definitely going to renovate NAMS, and so now do we know this, and this? We don't know that.
If you had the ability to get in there with that intent of what we're asking, you're capable of doing that?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
and how long would that take?
How long would it take you?
I don't know. I mean, so first, I mean, one of the first things, if that's what the board, we would call the environmental engineer you've been working with and say, how quickly could you do a hazardous material assessment of the building? I think, do you have a sense, Andrew, would that be 6 weeks, a month?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I just called them on another job. So they have availability next week, potentially to be on site. So, I mean, from there, it takes them a couple weeks to write a report for us. I mean, with testing and all those other things. So, I mean, by the February meeting, you probably have some information from the hazardous material engineer if authorized to engage them.
I guess as a follow-up to that, say worst case scenario, just thinking of like time constraints and whatnot that we're running into that we already kind of saw with the pretty aggressive timeline that was laid out. If you would run into significant asbestos, could you put a rough, dollar amount into what that could get us into?
Yes. Working with the environmental engineer, yes. Once the assessment's done, they can give you.
Okay. But not at this time. You couldn't say, oh, you could have, maybe $5 million in excess cost or something like that. That's just not something you can do.
Again, you don't have huge asbestos exposure. Much of it was abated in the 90s renovation. So we do know that, so.
Okay.
So do the board members have significant concerns about the site itself that we
No,
would
my-
need to address in a different
My
type of
concerns
report?
about the site are with the Hayes Group or, Sitelogic or somebody working with the municipality with the water issues and those kinds of things that we know are on that site to begin with. And what is
Although
there.
that may lead to like a structural engineer type of.
Correct. That's my other
report.
thing. I think we need to know as much about NAMS as possible before we make that decision to put $16+ million into that building, knowing that the HVAC is already 7 years old, so in less than 15 years, that's going to need to be replaced.
I'll add to the conversation too that if there is hazardous material in that building, whether you renovate it or you decide to demolish it, it'll still have to be remediated. You can't just demolish a building if it has hazardous materials in it. So it's going to happen one way or the other, regardless of the option you choose. So you can't just demolish a building if it has hazardous materials in it. The other thing that Sitelogic, Garrett alluded to talking about but didn't really get into because I wouldn't let him, is that they have a product called My Site IQ that we've already started. You've seen some preliminary stuff where I've started to build a lot of the facilities master plan and put a lot of the systems into the spreadsheet. Well, their software allows me to load all of that information in there, and they'll be able to start to identify any problem areas we have with our buildings, and especially NAMS. So there is a tool out there that we can use, and I don't know if Scott can talk to it more eloquently than I can, but when we met with them and went over that, that's a product that's going to be available to us as part of their services.
I think it's a deeper dive.
So I guess, Vincent, I don't know who else. So the thing that you're looking for is some sort of confidence that, there really is a $25 million or so difference between renovating Neil versus building something new?
Yes.
Is that what you're
I just
looking for,
want to
some-
make sure, I just want to make sure the used car is not getting too close to the new car price. Again, I'll just keep using that. I just think it would be a waste. Why would you just keep dumping money into something over
I
and over
agree
again?
to check it, but there's an element of risk for whatever decision we make.
Yeah,
We could
I mean,
decide to
that's what
build
I
a
was
new
gonna-
building
Well-
and run into problems,
Well,
with lawsuits and
with
stuff.
With new construction, you have more of a targeted price. I think with renovation, you don't know what you might get into. And with taxpayer dollars, my neighbors, I'm spending my neighbors' money. I'm going to be sure about this. Like, if I mess up on my own house, that's one thing. I'll own that, okay? We're spending our neighbors' money here, so I want assurances. I want absolute confidence.
On that note, just, he was ready to speak before when Barry come in, because Barry couldn't tell.
That's fine. I mean,
Scott, could you please finish up with your thoughts?
I think your scenario, I think, is dead on. You know, you have to look at what is the cost of that current building compared to new building, and you know, I think Kevin said that also. This My Site IQ tool that we have is a very deep dive into your buildings, and it's going to provide you the information that I think you're looking at that is going to be able to give you the information to make these tough decisions you have going forward with.
I think everybody's concern here is and it was what we asked them to do, the 30,000-foot view.
Right.
But what else is there based on conversations with prior board members, prior people that were in the community that have been in here in the 80s, is the late 80s when we when we reopened that school. I mean, there was a board that reopened that school. That school was closed.
Right.
That school was reopened and put in an elementary center, but that was K-5 for, I don't remember what Logan had, 500 or 600 kids, and probably 500. And the third floor at that point in time was not renovated. My understanding was the third floor was not renovated until it became the 5-6 building. Is that correct? I don't know if you know that, Mr. Patterson. I don't know.
That's before.
Okay.
No, all good points. And I think to maybe take Mr. Scalzo's analogy, I think we need to put the car up on the rack, right?
I agree.
And I think that what I'm hearing, and I'm asking for the board for confirmation, is it'd be helpful to get a little deeper dive on the major building systems. How's the roof? How's the walls? How's the foundations? How is the mechanical system? And again, after 7 years of use, what's the condition and what's the expected life if properly maintained? How's the electrical system? And what was included in this $16.5 million, and then what might be not? Is that?
Yeah.
correct?
Is there any?
So what toll, we have one here, you talked about, doing the hazmat, we can get that done quick. Is there a time frame we can get this up and running so we can get that information back to us within, next time we meet in February?
I would say yes. I think we could have more information in a month.
Scott, what do you think from your end with your product?
To have the information back to you by February, I don't think that's realistic.
What would be for you?
Well, I mean, we would need to be brought aboard, number
Right,
one.
right.
We would need to be gathering as much intel as we could from, drawings, utility bills, deep dive, looking at the building itself, talking with the users, as you had indicated, talking with people that know the history of that building. That's gonna take a little bit of time. I would say you could be looking at late spring, that we would probably be able to come back. I don't think the holdup is gonna be on our end. It's gonna be how quickly the information can be provided to us and have access to that building.
So with that, we used end of late spring, how was that on time frame for us in regards to moving forward in our decision? Because, one of our thoughts for tonight was if we come up with an option, possibly tonight, or for next week, what I mean? For Mr. Hayes, from your, not saying, because we have to still discuss what the architect would be, who the architect would be, but
Right.
you've been so generous in your time looking at everything and helping us. What time frame, how would that throw us off? Would that still be in time frame for us, going, 2 months out, 3 months out?
Generally, yes. I mean, the new building project, I think, is more kind of internal sense of what your time frame is and how you want to launch that project. But I don't think it hurts you per se.
All right, because I think Dr. Walsh did have, Doc, I'm sorry, what was your time frame for having a new structure open? I can't remember that. You remember, sir?
Yeah, we had it on a 3-year timeline. Make the commitment to an architect. 8 to 10 months, 12 months later, we're out to bid. Construction starts 24 to 30 months, and we're cutting the ribbon in 2025. I think financing it would be somewhere in the early parts of the first year.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
I have another question. Is NAMS, I don't know if you know this now or not, but is NAMS actually technology-wise up to date? Like when you look at the entire building, ready for?
No, it's not, and that's included in the 16.
That was included? Okay, okay.
Right. And again, what we talk about is, in the major renovations, we put in a technology infrastructure, and then the district essentially puts the final components in. So that infrastructure would be upgraded, and that's what we're doing in IMS. But I think in terms of interim, we could certainly look to see what we can bring back next month to share with you and continue to help address your concerns.
All right, thank you. Mr. Mowry?
Yeah, I would be remiss in not bringing up learning from our past experience. When you're considering the design, we need traffic, we need stormwater, and there are 3 things that we ran into the last time where it wasn't included in the proposal at the high school, the new high school, and it was like $1 million. It's small in the scheme of things, but we need to make sure those are worked out and factored in. We don't want to surprise anybody when we come back after the site review.
And thank you, appreciate it, because your experience from last time is truly valued at this point, because you may be the senior man here from that project. You and Dr. Jan Sani, right?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Hayes.
Dr. J is the senior one, just so you know.
Yeah. Thank you. We're not talking age. This was open to, the meeting is open to the public, and we still have the ability to call in if you choose, 412-851-6911. And I don't know if we have.
We have no callers.
We have no callers at this time. So, I don't know, Mr. Christensen, any other thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree. If we can have a little bit more confidence that, the delta between, the K through 5, or, even if it's not a K through 5, but a whole new 3 through 5 or something like that, as long as we're comfortable with the current state of Neil and that the, projected investments are going to get us what we want. Yeah, I think that's important to know before we move forward. So I can buy into that. The only other thing is, sorry I couldn't be there, but like, I guess other people on the call, I got COVID last week, so.
All right. Dr. Walsh, any other thoughts? I think we're coming towards the end of this, I believe, or we also have something to discuss if anybody else has any thoughts about the overall facilities master plan, but I know we did cover a lot here tonight. Dr. Walsh, any thoughts?
No, I think I've heard most of the questions that we set out to answer tonight have been answered. And the board gave Mr. Hayes some direction for February, so I think I got everything I need.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Jan Sani.
I concur with Dr. Walsh. I think we're in a good place right now.
Easy. I think we discussed everything here tonight we were set out to review. And if anybody else have any other thoughts?
I just want to thank Mr. Amrine, Mr. Mari, and Mr. Christensen and your staff for coming tonight. It's appreciated. We all need to work together. As one of 2 senior people on there, Mr. Mari, your comment really has stuck with me since the beginning of let's learn and let's move forward. And I think that is where we're starting tonight. And I really appreciate everybody coming out. I mean, this is a long meeting, so thank you very much.
I want to thank the elementary leadership team, too, for providing insight. So thank you to all of you coming up here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Agreed.
I really want to, sorry, Dave.
Go ahead, Gail, after
Thank you. I want to thank the principals that you brought a lot of clarity
at least to me, in thinking about how we want to move forward with this. You know, as a non-educator, you know, not realizing there's a natural break between second and third grade, because to be honest, I'm leaning towards that K through 3 building option, and now I'm rethinking that based on education, based on what you guys have said tonight. So I really appreciate you being here. It was not time wasted for sure for me. And municipality folks, thank you so much for coming, answering our questions. And Mr. Hayes and your team, you guys, you're great. I appreciate the clarity of the questions being answered with clarity. As a new board member, I wasn't in on this process from the beginning, so it's been fairly easy to catch up because of all of the input and the teaching going on here, which is what we're all about. So thank you very much. And board members, I appreciate all of your questions very much.
Yeah, I was just going to thank all of our elementary principals as well. I was actually in the same exact situation as Gail, a little bit towards the K-3 option. I think your kind of opinions and expertise have swayed me a little bit more towards K-2, at least as of now, but who knows what we'll hear from Mr. Hayes. And sorry we gave you yet another item to look into, but we appreciate it. And thank you to the municipal team that came today. I'm sorry it isn't your 30-minute meetings, and we apologize for that.
Thank you to everyone, the municipal staff. Thank you so much, Mr. Hayes and your group, the admin team, the board members, the principals, the folks at home, and I hope you all feel better soon. It was great, and I appreciate the conversation and being able to ask some questions and get some talking going about how we're feeling. So thank you.
Well, we're good. Darren, any comments? We're good, Darren?
Yeah, you know, when we take a look at our different options, say K through 5, K through 2, K through 3, if we're not doing a K through 5 building, honestly, the K through 2 and 3 through 5 makes more sense to me in terms of continuity of special education services, for example, because you're going to have those support teachers know those kids. Because first year you're kind of learning, second year you work with, third year you know. And so I think 3 years in a row is more appropriate. Plus, not to mention what everyone was talking about today about just the differences between second and third grade. But very, very, very cool presentation from everyone, and I really enjoyed it.
Again, thank you for everyone who came to the municipality, our administrative staff, and Mr. Hayes and Mr. Plumquist. Appreciate it. I think we had a lot covered here tonight, so I thank everybody. At this time, if there's any other questions on that, we'll be able to...
Need a motion to adjourn then.
Motion?
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.